backend, they use Starlet and Pydantic, which is mainly the backend framework for FastAPI. So as Robin said, even FastAPI has crossed the total number of stars in GitHub. I mean, it has overtaken Django and Flask. So for those reasons, FastAPI is basically getting traction and is being used in predominantly in machine learning and backend development. And they also started using data engineering. So this is the basic. This is the documentation page, and it is a very the documentation is pretty descriptive, and you can just read through it. So I'll be giving you some idea on how to you know, read the doc and execute the same in the code as we go through the code template which I've created. So yeah, so that is the intro about FastAPI, and there are. So I'm not saying FastAPI is perfect. When compared to Flask and Django, there are some minor disadvantages in the sense of security and the number of people who have been using this. So, in case if there is an error or something, it might take some time, when compared to Django or Flask. But that is getting, improved upon time as we progress. Okay. So I will directly move on to the code. So let me just share my Python. Okay, so you see my Python screen. So this is the basic code template for FastAPI, and this is very similar, or this is exactly similar to what we did in Unity. So the code is written in a specific detailed way by following the industry standards, using the 5x and all those things. So also one more thing, in each code, in the bottom I've actually given the doc. So whatever the code is doing or whatever I've used here, there's a detailed doc specifying what I've done there. Okay. So in FastAPI, similar to Flask, basically we start off with the main file. So as you can see the structure, I have actually defined separate folders for the configurations or the files which you're using, which I will explain in just a second. So first thing is, before creating any project, we have to create a virtual environment, and inside that we'll be creating all those things, and we will be basically starting off with the requirements. Okay, requirements and main.py is the basic thing which we need. So in requirements, these are some of the so this was exactly copy pasted from the new money thing. So most of them are not required. These are some of them are actually third party requirements. But so some of the things which we need here is SQL Alchemy utils, all those things. Okay, Ubicon, so Starlet, all those things are required. Okay. So the command to install this is basically pip install -r requirements, or if you are actually and also I've actually updated this in the code commit. So the PR has been raised. So once it is merged, if anyone pulls the code, it will automatically ask you to install the requirements. So that will be done automatically by Python itself. Okay. So that is the basic thing which we do here. So starting off with the main file. So this is the main file. These are some of the settings which I will let you know, or which I will show you why I have created this. So this is just to beautify the Swagger page or the doc page of FastAPI. So I've actually mentioned the FastAPI backend APIs. API used to support backend functionality. These are all are actually descriptions which can be uh, created custom by the developer, so that the end user or whoever is using the Swagger or the docs can understand. Okay, so I'll just show you this being done. So in FastAPI, there is actually something known as I think you can't see my screen right. Okay, you can see my entire screen. Right? Okay. All right. So here, if you just Okay, so you can see here that I have actually modified this page based on my requirement. So you can see there is an actually something known as an open API schema where you can custom design the schema of the page of this Swagger UI, where you can give fast API backend API. So whatever I've written here, that is being projected here. Okay, and also here there is actually a link here. This is actually an image which is actually being stored in a CloudFront server. So I'll show you that also. If you do redoc, so redoc is also another provision by FastAPI where it will give you a detailed description of the API, and you can also custom give images here. So this is the image new, right? So this stands for new money, and that image is being stored here. Okay, so if I change this, this will go. Correct. So that's the basic thing. And then there is cost. This is mainly for the front end. And even if you don't give this, this is pretty much fine because when we were doing it, we did not use it because the DevOps team handled it from their side. Okay. So cost is basically cross within reference system. So mainly for interacting APIs with front end and back end. Okay. So here, FastAPI uses an async model where it can, get hit by multiple requests and it will still be fast. So here, you're using a Ubicon app model to run this, and we are basically hosting it in my local system, and the port is basically 4000, which you can change as per your requirement. Okay. So I will just show you how the API works, and then we will move on to how I've structured the code. Okay. So all right. So this is the API link, and what I'm doing is I've actually created a Postgres table with country code and country name. There is more than, I think there is 200 plus records here. So what I'll be doing is I'll be simply querying the data, and I'll be getting the country code and country name. Okay. So this is actually saved one. So what I have done is I've given the URL path here and the API name, the limit and the keyword. So limit and keyword is basically something which I've added additionally. So limit is basically it will give you the first 10 records. If you're filtering through, suppose say 100 records, it will give you the first 10 records. And keyword A in the sense, it will give you the country and its code, which has the letter A or capital A or, yeah, you understand that, right? Okay. So also in the authorization part, I've actually added a JWT token. So usually they will add a JWT token here, and this token can be validated. Also inside this token, we can pass some sensitive data. So in order to explain this example, I've actually referred this website known as jwt.io. So what you can do is you can select the algorithm as HS256. You can select, there are multiple algorithms, but I'm using HS256, and the type is JWT. And this is the payload data. So this is the data which you can encode in this URL. Okay. So there is also a secret key here, and only using this secret key we can decode this specific URL. Okay. These are some basics of backend. This is used for security. Okay. You can mention anything. You can mention the name. You can mention the your password or something. Whatever you want, whatever is sensitive to that specific app, you can pass it here, and you can send it using the JWT token. Okay. All right. So, okay. So this is a token, and ideally, when you're creating an API, usually there will be some headers. Okay. So these are the headers which I'm passing. So I think in this case, we are only passing the authorization. No other headers are there. Okay. And the parameters are limit and keyword. So if I just hit it, you can see that we are getting the response like this. So at the bottom, you can see the count and the limit. So you set it as.
Hey, answer one. There is some background noise. Is it? I don't know. Is it
I
okay
heard
with everyone?
some kind of noise.
I don't have.
or maybe can you increase the
You know,
in your mic?
okay.
Yeah, that is.
Okay, just give me. That was the fancy. Did I? Am I clear now, Robin? Is it okay?
Yeah, I think it's fine. There is some background noise, but yeah, I think it's okay. Just or others on the line.
Yeah, it's
Or is it okay?
fine.
Okay.
I think maybe the AC. I think they are reducing the AC up. Is it fine now? I think there is a slight drilling happening on the top floor.
Yeah, yeah,
What is
Oh,
that?
it's sounding like a bike going. Yeah.
Okay, I think some people here are not having any background noise. I don't know. Okay, just let me know if there
But
is
yeah, now
anything
I
in
think now
you.
it's better. I mean, I think yeah, you
Yeah.
can.
yeah.
All right. So, yeah, so you can just see the results here and the count and the limit as mentioned. Okay. So now we'll be moving on to the code. So as I mentioned from here, the app will be starting. So initially, you will have to set a router. Okay, so that is the first thing which we have to do it in FastAPI so that we can control the flow of. So when you're writing an API, you need your control to go to a specific function, right? So for that, you can use an API router. In Flask, it is Blueprint. I think in Django, maybe I think they might be using some other specific cases, right? Blueprint or router, I guess. Maybe please refer with those who have done Django. But in Fast API, they use something known as router. Okay. So this is the API router which is being provided to us from Fast API side. So here, what I've done is I've actually created an API router and I've given a prefix for this country. Okay. Also, so I've created a decorator here, and inside this decorator, we can give some basic status code, tags, the responses, all those things. Okay. So this responses is basically, so if you look at the, okay, so inside this, you can see all these responses, right? So 200, 400, 401, 406, 422 validation. So these are all the different kinds of errors which has been highlighted here. And this has been highlighted because I've actually made it highlighted there. So what you can do is we can create a response file, and this response file is actually embedded in this folder known as schema. So inside schema, I've actually created the responses here. So for 400, for 401, for 406, 500. So based on your requirement, you can create this JSON format, and you can actually um, encode it here so that inside the Swagger also you can see it. Okay, so that is what you're seeing here. All right. So, and this is something like a basic response for the 200 case, and you can see that here. So, this is the same thing, which is available here. Okay. So, yeah. All right. Okay. So, and now I will come to the basic structure of the code. So, in this, what I've done is I've segregated this into multiple cases here. So, initially it will come to router, but in the background there are some things happening. So I'll go step by step. So first folder is common. So inside common, there are some app constants which you should define based on your requirement or based on the standards. Okay. and there is an app response here. So this is basically the template or the code for storing your app responses, whether it is the success code, the success data, or whatever you're querying, right? So whatever value is being returned, you can actually store it in this class model. Okay, and this is the logging configuration. And here, this is the same as that of Unity, and they have actually used three loggers here. One is the application logger, second is the audit logger, and third is the third-party logger. Okay. The reason why they have used three logging cases is that application is when the application is running, or application in the sense the router is running, and the audit table is basically for SQL function. So whenever the control goes to an SQL file and whatever query gets executed, this functionality or this audit log will be passed on, and a separate log will be created for that. Okay, so for time being, I've only used the application logger, but you can set it as per your requirement. Okay. And then there is the messages. So here we have all the messages. We have not hard coded any messages in the. If you look at the code, you can see that there is no hard coded messages here, except for some cases. But most cases we have actually encoded the key value based on the messages we have provided here, okay, in this file. All right. So that is the first folder. So is there any doubts or confusions? If not, I can move forward.
Just one doubt.
Yeah.
This is Kavita. Just about the JWT. So, is it the JWT? Is it used for sensitive information?
Yes, ideally it is used for sensitive information. So normally, in web development or backend development, they will use something known as they will use an encoded JWT token. So it need not be JWT token itself. It can be, so there's a company known as Auth0, which is also something which we have used normally. So they basically give us secure access or tokens. So they have inbuilt APIs on their own, which generates tokens as well as decodes tokens. Okay, so based on your pricing model, they will provide what can I say API models for generating tokens based on your requirement. Yeah. So there are third party. So this is actually one of the third party which you have used for securing the app. Okay.
Okay. So information like passwords and
Yes. Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Passwords, emails, sensitive data, and any sort of things. Yeah.
Okay.
And as I mentioned, they have their own inbuilt APIs and they have very detailed documents also. So if you go to the docs, there are some very detailed documentation for that. So you can customize it as per your requirement also. So yes, yeah. So that is the first folder. The second folder. Okay, so this is required. Second folder is the DB configuration. So here what I've done is I've created a basic database URL, and ideally these things are not stored in the system. Okay, they are never stored in the local system. So, but for time being, I've stored it here. So this is the JWT secret key. Okay, so which I mentioned. So yeah, you need to have the secret key, and I've mentioned the Swagger and URL docs also. So this is ideally, or in most cases, will be stored in a secret manager in any of the cloud providers, whether it is AWS, Azure, or GCP. So, and using the secret key API or the there will be an API provided by AWS in order to access these keys, and using those, you can access the keys and you can dynamically embed those values here so that we can establish a connection. Okay. So that will be ideally it will be done. So what I'm doing is establishing the database URL, creating the engine, creating a queue pool and a pool size. So queue pool is basically pool size is basically sort of a queue pool. Queue pool is basically something like if you have a session and if you don't want to create multiple sessions, what you can do is once the session is created, you can store it in the queue pool, and whenever someone else is accessing, they don't have to create a session from the beginning. They can use the same session and they can query it, which makes the API call faster and the response also faster. Okay. All right. And here the maximum overflow is 20. So we have created 20 pool sizes, and this is the schema. Okay. So the schema here basically means that in Postgres, whenever you create a database and a database name, there will be schemas here. You can create multiple schemas, whether it is an admin dev schema or a public schema. And inside the public schema, I have a customer table. So I'm accessing, sorry, the country table. I'm accessing the country table. So I have to mention the schema and the database within which I'm accessing these values. Okay. So I'm creating a session and declaring a base value. Okay. So all the documentations are provided here. So you can just, that is the configuration. So now comes the dependencies. So dependencies here, as I mentioned, I told you, right, whenever you're using a JWT token validation, you need to have a function which basically decodes the token and verifies whether whether it is an actual valid token, invalid token, or a bad token. So all these things can be verified here, and these are all encapsulated or encoded in try-except block. So whenever there is an error, you can easily catch it. Okay, so that is something which is important. Yeah, I will show you this step by step how it works using the debug method. So I will show you that. So this is the dependencies. So this is the repository. So you can name it as per your requirement. I just named it based on one of the architects gave me a file, and in that the same structure was there, so I followed that. So you can name these folders as per your requirement. So this is here. This is the repository or the file where we have stored the SQL commands. Okay. So yeah, so in the SQL command, uh, so ideally what I'm doing here, or in Flask and FastAPI, what I have done or what we as a team did was, once the session is made, we store the metadata of the table. So metadata in the sense, what is the row, what is the column, all those things. We didn't load the entire table, we just loaded the metadata and we stored it in an LRU cache. Okay, so this is an caching system which is basically available in Python itself. So you can make use of that. And once it is done, we basically do the query and return the value. Okay, so I will show you that when the code is working. Okay. The next is router, which I explained. So router is basically the initial point when the app starts and when you hit the API. This is where the control comes. Okay, that is for okay. So and then there is the schema part. Schema is where you can mention all the schemas. So if you're so for the time being, I've actually created a get method, and if you're having a post method, ideally you will have some body. Body in the sense you will have something like, for example, if you're listing a country or state or something, you can mention the body, and you can actually check whether the key value pair is city state and the value is an integer, or whether it is the right format, or whether it is a string, whether it is having any integer parts or something. If it's an integer, you can actually code it in a way that you can get a validation or something. Okay. So these are all some of the things which you have used in Umani. So I just kept it so that you can have an idea. All right. So next comes the services. So this is the manager part. So ideally, there are three files through which the control flows. The first one is the router, second one is the manager, and the third one is the SQL file. Okay. So in the router, so router is basically the place or the initial place where we will be checking the tokens, we will be validating whether the parameter passed are correct, okay, whether it is string or all those things, okay. Those things will be done in the router or the initial file, okay. In the manager file, there will be, this is the place where, what can I say, the business use case is done. So if you want to modify the data in such a way before presenting it to the user, you can manipulate the data here. Okay, so or if any specific use case, or if you want to send it to a third-party API in order to verify the details, you can do it here. So you can have a clear structure or clear point. If something happens or if some error happens, you can directly go to the manager file and debug it. Okay. So these are some of the main things. So yeah, then there is the env file which I have showed you. So again, the documentation is pretty detailed. All right, so I'll just execute it and I'll just show you how it works one by one. So hope everyone knows how a debug method works. So we'll give you a tutorial for that also. So here, if you basically click here, so you can put some pointer marks here. Okay. And if you run the code in debug mode, what happens is, okay, so the code has started. So, so you can see that it will directly come to the try catch. Okay. So before going into the code, I will start off on the function itself. So here, this is the request body. So this will basically retrieve the request parameters which are given here. So request parameter in the sense, if you have something in the body, if you are passing something in the body, for example, something in the body, that will be captured by the request. And using this request, and within the request also, we can check whether the schema is right or not. Okay. And this is the keyword and the limit which we pass in the headers, or sorry, in the parameters. Okay. So here are the parameters. We have actually passed the limit and keyword, and it will basically check whether it's a string or integer. If it is okay, it will again go for the validation part. Okay. And if you want to see how this works, I will show you that also. So JW token, if you basically put a token mark here, and if I re-execute it, see, when the code hits the API, since I've marked the debug code here, there is a dependency injection here. So this is known as a dependency injection. This is something which is specific to FastAPI. So what it does is, before going inside this function, it will make sure that the valid token is valid. If it was Flask, or if it is Flask, what you have to do is, or what we will generally do is, we will go inside the function, okay, and within the function itself, we will write the code to decode the token. Okay. Instead of that, what we can do is we can write the validation token in a separate file, and we can inject the dependency here. So before going inside, it will come to the specific function, which is the JWT validation, and it will basically verify. So I'm going it step by step. So you can see that it will take the token, and now it will decode the token. So the secret key is basically the secret key which we took from the env file, and we will decode it. And when we decoded it, we got the data which we encoded. Okay, so this was the data which was encoded. Okay, so the same data we have got here, and once that is got, we can basically check whether the, so in this if condition, we can check whether we have the data or not, whether the password is received or the name is received or the email is received. We can do some additional checks here also, but I have limited to this because since this is an example, but you can have additional checks here if you want. Okay. And if it is okay, what happens is that it will return a response. Okay. It will return a response here, and you can see that is a 200 response that you're getting here. Okay. So that is how the dependency injection works. So once the dependency injection works, we can make sure that the code is returned, right? So you can check whether the validation code is 200. So here it is stored in a key known as validation, and within the key you can access the code. You can check, and after that you can see that it goes inside, and it will create a logger here. Okay, so this basically creates a logger or logs the steps or logs the. So whenever we are hitting an API, it goes to a specific path, right? So in order to specifically create a path for that, or to retrace it whenever we have a bug, you can create this. And for that, I think we have, or I have actually imported the log files here somewhere. Yeah, app log. Okay, application logger. I've imported the app log from the common files which we have created. Okay. So once that is done, we can move forward. So as you can see, everything is encoded in a try except block. So if this fails, it will directly come to this else block. Okay, and if something, if some exception happens, it will be captured by this exception. Okay, so for all those, we have actually created a separate exception case for that. Okay, now moving on with the code. So next is, I'm calling a function here. Okay, so you can go inside this function either by clicking on step into. Okay, there is something known as step into here. Okay, F7. Okay, so in my keyboard it is F7, but in your system it can change. Okay, so I'm clicking on F7. So what happened here is I have gone to the manager file. Okay, so I've gone to the manager file. I told you initially we will come to the router, then we will come to the manager, and then we will go to the SQL file. Okay, so here also we are actually specifically defining the app response, which is for the response which we get from this function. And again, we are going inside another function known as a country filter. So this is actually the SQL file. Okay, again I'll press F7. So we are into the, or we are in the SQL file. Okay. So inside the SQL file, ideally, since the table has been loaded initially, or when we basically run the app itself, the DB gets created and the table initialized and the metadata gets stored in this cache. Okay. So everything is done when the app runs. So you don't have to specifically create a session, query the table, all those things as need not be done because it is already done in the app run itself. So all you have to do is basically get the table, list the keys. So there is country code and country name. So there is keyword A. So first I'm doing is I'm searching it with respect to the keyword. Okay, so it's searching the table with respect to this keyword A. So for that you can use this I like character, which is a wildcard character, and also there's a limit function. Using the limit function, you can actually create an SQL code for that same. So these are all SQL Alchemy forums, okay. And we'll get the data. So after that, again, see everything is logged. Okay, after each and every step it has been logged. You'll get the, so this is the data which you get after the execution. So the execution is not complete. So we have to complete that. Okay. So once this is done, it will go forward. Okay, so this will go until we reach the 65 mark. So I'm pressing F9. Okay, so we have again come back to the manager. That is because once this loop ends, that is once the 65 values get embedded in this dictionary, it will return this value. Okay, so it will return this value in the sense it will go back. So this will be returned, and this will be returned back to the place where it has been called. Called in the sense you have called it from the manager function, right? So we'll come here. So okay, so it has also gone back to the, okay, so admin file also. So ideally what happens is once this code is executed, everything works fine. It will store the response, return the response, come to the manager. The manager will again check whether the response is 200 or not. Okay. Again, we will set an app response and it will again return the app response back to admin. Okay. And finally, this will be returned back to us. Okay. So yeah, so once this is done, you can see here that the entire list has been given here. Okay. So this is how it works, and this is the entire structure for FastAPI. So when we talk about microservice, this will be one specific module. One specific module in the sense, in this module, you will be only be handling the country details, or you can say that. So these things are common, right? The common config, the dependencies, the schema, services can be used again and again. Okay. So these things can be common, and the router can change, whether it is a country, whether it's a state, whether you are trying to fit the address, right? So those things can be specifically created as a separate file so that it does not get clubbed together with other data. So that is how the microservice architecture stuff works, and this is how we have been, how we are deploying it to database. Okay. So this is the entire working on structure of FastAPI in microservice format. So if you have any doubts, I think you can ask me now. So once you know how to debug, right, it is very simple. You can actually debug it step by step and understand how it works. Okay. Each and every step you can debug. All you have to do is put a debug pointer and just launch the debug mechanism, debug me, and just hit the request body. You can debug it step by step so you understand what is happening in the code. Also, you can refer these documents because this is pretty in detail documentation, so you can understand what is happening. These things are pretty much the same. I think this is same in Flask or Django, but these things are different. Okay, you can have much more of this, which I will show you. I'll show you a basic idea. So So in FastAPI, there are multiple ways to do that. In request itself, so you can see if you are passing a request body, and if you want to check the schema, you can directly mention it here and check the schema. Okay, so you can do all those. Yeah, there are a lot of things there. Query parameter and validation. You can check the query parameters. You can mention it as a union string, all those things, and see whether it is there or not. All the values are there or not. Okay, multiple parameters you can check. Okay, you can just all I have to do is just mention this parameters. Also, here you can set the greater and less than limit. Okay, that is, if you are passing an ID, you can check whether it is a greater than 0, less than 1000 in the function body itself. Okay. In Flask, what you have to do is you have to create a separate function for that, and you have to check whether it is greater than 0, less than. So this actually decreases the debugging, right? So the debugging time is, or debugging time, or what can I say? If something happens within that function, it will be taking or you will take a lot of time to debug. So that will be drastically reduced if you use this methodology or FastAPI. Okay. So there is a lot of methodologies or functions or things available in FastAPI. All you have to do is just go through the documentation and just trial and error. So which will give you a good idea on how things work. Okay. So other than that, yeah, I think that's it from my side. If you have any doubts, I think you can ask now.
And sir, just another doubt about the session. So when you open a session, is it like for one functionality, you will open the session and you close that session after that particular functionality is done?
Ideally, when you're deploying it in the server, I've mentioned this queue pool, right? So the server will be running 24/7. Okay. So which in turn means the app is running 24/7, right? So when someone creates a schema, initially it might take some time. So when the data is high, initially it might take some time, and it will store it in the queue pool. Okay. And after that, when the second user is hitting the same API or any other API, the session is already created, they can reuse that session. Okay.
Okay.
So when the app is stopped, the session will close. That is obvious, right?
Okay,
so
we don't have to specifically mention that we have to close the session. Like I saw a code session dot close.
Yeah, you can do that, but the problem is for each request or when you're hitting the API, each time you'll be creating a session, which is an additional 1 or 2 seconds, right? Which is not ideal. Here you can see that initially, I think when I was hitting the API. So it is 51 milliseconds. Yeah, see, it is 50 milliseconds now. Okay, so it will change, but ideally that is a session difference. Okay. So once the session is there, we'll reuse that session. Okay.
Okay.
So whenever you're creating APIs, initially when we were having multiple sessions or when we were creating sessions for each and every API hit, the problem was uh, it was taking a lot of time. Some APIs were taking 1 second, 2 seconds, even 10 seconds, which is not ideal. Mainly, APIs has to be very fast. This is also slow in most cases. People say that it needs to be 20 milliseconds and all. In real time systems and all. So this is 48 milliseconds, okay, not seconds. 48 milliseconds. Mainly depends on the type of backend system that you're using. Yeah, I guess that is all about FastAPI. I guess.
So answer like you have the document as well in a right. I mean, or it's you're gonna take this and document it.
I think I've made the document for each and every separate file in the code itself, so it is easy for the
Okay.
right?
Okay.
Yeah, instead of separate document, all you have to do is just pull the model. I mean, clone this particular FastAPI example, then just hit the request, so it will work. But before that, make sure that you install the requirements. Okay. Once they create the virtual environment, install the requirements, and then hit the postman. Okay, so it will work. I've actually created a PR, so I think either Justin or Anurag will merge it sooner or later. So after that, you guys can use it.
Okay,
And
so this
also
is
these
under
are, yeah,
the tech asset repo.
yes. See, no, no, not on the tech asset. I think it is under alpha. I think I was told to put in alpha.
Okay, okay.
Yes, Safna has put some things there, right? So I've created a folder with my name and I've put both Flask and FastAPI code there.
Okay, okay. Fine,
So
fine.
yeah, and also one more thing, this is the logging. Okay, so these are all the logs. So there are different ways to store the logs. Either you can store it in a file, or you can display it in the console, or you can push it into Kibana and then monitor from there once it is in the server. There are a lot of ways to do that. So yeah, so I guess this is the overall structure for FastAPI. So yeah. Again, I told you this is you can do further optimizations on this. Okay, so there is something known as MITZ cache. Okay, so here what happens is that once this, so if you're trying to call this table again, what happens is that it will again create the metadata. Okay, so instead of that, what you can do is you can actually store this in a MITZ cache. So MITZ cache in the sense, once this metadata of this particular table is created, and if you are trying to hit this API again, the metadata won't be created again. Instead, it will retrieve those data from the cache. Okay. So you can do some optimizations there. You just have to go through the. I think there is a module known as MITZ cache. Okay, you can do that.
Okay, yeah, that's a good thought. So do we have the same thing in Flask or Django?
Yeah, in Flask it is there. It is actually a separate module. Yeah, I think it's a separate module in Flask. I mean, for Python itself, you can use that. It is not respective to FastAPI. You can use it in Django or whatever backend you use, provided you are using Python. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
So some basic tips is that you just have to know debugging. Once debugging is okay, you can go through any code, whether if there is any documentation or no documentation. Once the debugging is, once you understand the concept of debugging, how to go through files and query those things, the rest of it is very easy. You can understand the code within days. Yeah, yeah. I think that's it from my side, Robert.
Sure, yeah, thanks. Great session, Ansel.
Yeah.
Hey, one question, maybe to Anurag, Guru, or Chandani, Moshno. So when you compare this to Django, how is it like? Is it mostly similar, or structurally this is similar? Which one do you guys think is easier?
Actually, I think if you are using fast API, we have to do it manually, like the structuring of code, right? But in case of
Yeah.
Django, like if we run that command create project, it will create it will create a folder structure.
Okay.
Oh,
Maybe
creating
does
project
FastAPI
as
has a similar one? I don't know. Maybe it may not.
Yeah, I think so. I think maybe it is there, but I've not gone into it. But it should be there. I think. Yeah.
Okay. So because I'm trying to see why uh, the traction is going towards FastAPI. There is something there better, right? At somewhere, right, which is making it more popular, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, I think
Maybe.
this is lightweight,
Yeah.
right? I mean, can we
Yeah.
handle like
This is.
huge data with this one compared to
Yes,
Django?
definitely yes. Yeah. I think we
Okay.
were handling, like we were querying more than 1 lakh records or something in human time.
But I think
That
that
we see.
needs that scaling approach, right? It
Yeah,
cannot be with a
that has to be
standalone
there because
application.
even Python and FastAPI has its limitations, right? After a certain case, it is all up to the servers and the RAM available.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All the optimizations that we do is basically here in the function which I mentioned, right? Some of the things like dependency injection, the query parameter validation, all those things. those things save a lot of time. Okay. So that is one thing which makes development quicker, I guess. Because in Flask, I can show you the code. There's a separate file for this where we have to create a function, go through those things, check it whether it is in the specific case or string and all those things. It's quite, time consuming, and even if some bugs happen, we won't know where it is happening because it is in separate files, right? So,
Okay. Any questions from anyone for answer?
And one thing, actually, FastAPI is using already built at DB, right? Is there any migration?
Yeah, migrations is possible, but ideally, when we have more than like 20, 30 tables, I think it will be difficult to have the migration approach, right? Because
okay.
in Numony, when we have, so Kavita knows this, when we have 30 tables and we have a development server, we have a quality server and a UAT server, and you need to make some changes in one specific table in all three servers. What you can do is you can create a script, a database script, and you can deploy it in the server itself, in one server. So once the merging is done, those changes will be reflected in UAT and quality. So the migration approach is okay once if the tables are small, but if the tables is very high, it is better to have a separate database operator or database management analyst or something.
Okay.
So does that script compare with the model structure as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, else it will crash, right? The tables
Yeah,
might
that's what I was
crash.
saying.
Yeah,
So
it has to match.
that automation script is actually then comparing the model script and then it's syncing up production UAT whatever, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
Yeah, great session, Ansel. Yeah, thanks for your time and thanks for the effort.
Thanks for the-
Yeah, thank you.
There is no doubts. I think we can wind up, right?
I guess so. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, Answer. Yeah.